Hi everyone, I'm KOFXV. Throughout the past 3 or so years, a lot of video games have been released that have had their fair share of hype. Even though it's a bit of a blanket statement to say such a thing, I think the big self-isolation period has made people look forward to simpler things like videos game a lot more, and generally that meant a lot more people online were talking about what new pieces of media they were excited to consume. Over time, as things do, this changed for a lot of people, but ever since the announcement of this one game, it has consistently prevailed at the top of my list every time someone asked me, which was like never, I think. Before we talk about the game itself, let me go into a bit about myself and my experiences of the genre and series this game is a part of. I like fighting games. And that's absolutely no secret to the people who have met me. I mean, just look at this. Street Fighter 2 World Warrior was the first video game I ever played, and the first game I remember purchasing with people money was Mortal Kombat Trilogy, so retro fighting games had always been a part of my life. But for some reason, it took me a very long time to get on the hype train for the King of Fighters, SNK's long-running crossover series. Capcom vs SNK 2 was actually the first time I had heard of literally any of SNK's characters or franchises, and in retrospect I regret not getting into KOF sooner. Granted, the first KOF game I ever played was King of Fighters 2000, followed by 2001, so maybe my introduction to the series could have been a bit better, but KOF 2000 is good at least. 2002 Unlimited Match was my first truly real KOF experience, and it's probably the exact point in time that I fell for the series and its ideas and concepts. When divorced from the lens of someone who had been reading exclusively the Nests Chronicles arc since they got into the series, which is, frankly, the worst fucking arc the series has in terms of story to offer, I realised I had stumbled upon a diverse franchise that had so much to offer to fighting game fans, and I fell in love. Fast forward to 2022, and now I'm an adult, and KOF has simply not stopped being the love of my life in terms of fighting games. And honestly, I think that King of Fighters 15, the latest entry in the series, it came out at the exact right time for that sentiment. To illustrate what I mean by this, first off I need to actually give my thoughts on the game, so this is going to be less like one big video essay and more like two mini thought pieces back to back. The Worldwide Martial Arts Invitational, the King of Fighters, has returned, and as always you can expect to see faces new and old, lots and lots of fire, combos that delete entire fucking health bars, and probably some sort of eldritch horror waiting for you at the finals. The King of Fighters 15 is the first game SNK has released after its big revival era, let's call it, which consisted of a long-awaited continuation to KOF with the King of Fighters 14 and the reboot of Samurai Shodown. The King of Fighters 14 also served as a huge stepping stone in the series because, besides being, admittedly, kinda freaking ugly, it ended in a cliffhanger that implied the future of the series would bring back characters who, for one reason or another, couldn't really come back in future games, be it that they died, were under pretend copyright jail, or, in one fringe case, may have inadvertently rewritten the timeline and deleted their ancestors from existence, thus creating a time paradox that killed them too and caused a lot of massive changes to the KOF universe, the ramifications of which are still being seen to this day. You know, just a hypothetical. As such, the King of Fighters 15 features a diverse legacy roster with a lot of characters new and old, along with some who haven't really been seen in the canon game since mostly the early 2000s, but in the case of one team an absence of 25 years. As such, the roster is really tight and jam-packed with characters that basically everyone will find his full team to pick from, unless you happen to be like my sister who is a huge Kim Kafwan fan. I didn't put this in the script, but I really should talk about the new characters, I think, if I'm on this tangent. First off, Isla and Amanda, also known as my new favourite King of Fighters character. While her personality is nothing too special, I really like what she brings to the dynamic of the story arc, and I absolutely love her style. It just kind of feels like a me-core character, you know? The second new character is Dolores. I never realised she was holding a plate of corn in this scene. Wait. Dolores is a shaman who was killed long before the current story arc properly started. She has these mud powers and has this cool little mud monster that looks like he came out of Scooby-Doo. I kind of adore it, it's my little scrunkle. Much like with Isla and Amanda, I really like what Dolores brought to the story of KOF, especially to Kukri, who went from being a character I kinda don't care about to one of my mains and a pretty fun character all things considered. And the last new character is Cronin McDougall, who is definitely not K49 from KOF 2001, has nothing to do with K49 from KOF 2001, and you should not ask if he's kinda like K49 from KOF 2001. However, if you were to ask me if he's sorta like K49 from KOF 2001, I would probably say yes. He has some of the moves from K49 from KOF 2001, but he's probably maybe definitely not the same character. He's a separate human being, I swear to god. He's nothing like that dude, and he's also nothing like Nameless from O2UM, and definitely absolutely nothing like Tetsuo from Akira. I swear on me mum. In conclusion, I like what these three bring to the story, and they're all really fun to play as well, especially Isla, who very quickly became a new main of mine. Alongside these characters, and all of the characters I guess, there are plenty of other facets in the game that drip with fan service for long-time fans. For example, the DJ station. This thing fucking rules. They've got songs from pretty much every mainline KOF title ever for you to listen to in both your menus and during matches. These do work online too, so if you for whatever reason want to deal psychic damage to your opponents on ranked by playing KOF 2001's shitty dumb soundtrack during your matches, you know, you can do that. This also means that if you want the choice of death or humiliation from KOF 94 to play on literally every single menu and stage, you can also do that, I guess. Don't though. Along with the main KOF titles, they also have Fatal Fury, Samurai Showdown, and some Neo Geo and SNK songs from other games, which means you can rest easy and see that Street Smart is finally being acknowledged in a modern SNK game again. Woo! Yes! Street Smart! Or what is Street Smart actually? I've never heard of Street Smart before. If there's one thing I can criticise about the soundtrack, it's that two very popular games, 98 Ultimate Match and 2002 Unlimited Match, are seemingly completely absent from the DJ station, which means their very well received soundtracks can't be played. 98 Ultimate Match I understand, since most of its songs are in the regular version of 98 anyway, but the idea that 2002 Unlimited Match's songs made it into fucking Smash Bros but are completely absent from King of Fighters 15 is a teensy weensy bit cringe. It's what I would say if they didn't add 2002 Unlimited Match's soundtrack while I was making this goddamn video. Of course, 15's soundtrack is not without its own merits and is sealed tightly with some, as the system voice would call them, bangers. No, really, he says that. Bangers. The entire soundtrack of the game is said to go quote-unquote hard as fuck, a quote attributed to me. My favourite songs from the new soundtrack are Fictitious or Real, Time for Revolution, It's Our Generation,
You're an artifact of the past. We are here to bring the contrast. The global generation has risen. You live in a world of
and How About a Trip to PAOPAO CAFÉ. Which has probably been playing in the background right now because I love it so much. Now maybe I should talk about the game. This is a video game. I should clarify that this is in fact a video game. In terms of gameplay, the systems feel like a consolidated version of how many previous popular KOF games played, similar to King of Fighters 14. In fact, the game is more or less a refinement of the mechanics introduced in 14, and is generally better feeling, I think. For instance, EX moves are no longer locked to 14's returning feature max mode, meaning Shune can just TK air dash whenever the fuck he wants. So some of his really strong mix-ups and fun pressure is no longer necessarily situational. Sure, it's bad, but it's not situational. Damage is also way higher in this game, which is great, because I do love the KOF thought process of, if you get hit by someone who has full meter, you should just fucking die. Also, it's good because now when you get hit by a Vanessa main, you aren't watching her corner juggle you for like a full fucking uninterrupted minute. There's lots of other changes about this game compared to the last, but EX moves are going to be the one you notice most. Oh, and Shatter Strike, which is sort of like an EX version of your standing CD, I guess. That doesn't really cut how it is, it's a very important tool that does many things actually. But these changes go a really long way to improving the game feel of 15 compared to 14, because now the game is giving you way more things you can do without necessarily overwhelming you with the overly specific details behind them. Even though 15 really just expands on 14, I think that's kind of all a new KOF game really needed to do. 14's mechanics were already pretty solid, and 15 simply serves to make them feel even better and more cohesive and solid-er. I've always really liked how KOF has always focused on refining the mechanics it already has over time, rather than constantly introducing new ones. It's a design decision that makes going from game to game a teensy bit easier than it would ordinarily be. It's worth noting that on this tangent that KOF has always kind of been a series that rewards legacy knowledge, so if you could play, say, Iori Yagami in previous games, you can probably play him here. You might complain about how they rained tackle, but you'll live. In short, the gameplay changes kinda feel like a King of Fighters 14 too, and that's a good thing. The story arcs of KOF tend to start with a new set of core mechanics, and the sequels within that story arc sort of refine those mechanics, so this was to be expected. However, as surprising as it may seem due to the last, 10 minutes of this video, the main point of this vid was not for me to gush about or review King of Fighters 15. I mean, I kinda have a Twitter thread for reviewing the things I consume, and as you know, this is a 2-part video and the second part is coming now. So what was the point of this entire video? Well, a really good way to open up this opinion piece is the King of Fighters 15 is a fighting game. And before you say, Case, this is so fucking obvious, what the hell do you mean? I need to preface that, dear God, I promise I'm going somewhere with this. Over the past few years, I've been experiencing this sort of fatigue with the overall feel of modern fighting games that I wanted to get off my chest recently. It's really hard to say this without coming off as ungrateful, because many of these games still harbour fantastic fighting game experiences beneath all of this baggage. Fighting games have really struggled to maintain my attention because a lot of them nowadays feel really... how do I put this? Feel really unproud to be what they are. This is the most fucking weird and frankly the most disagreeable take I've ever had on this channel, which is saying a lot, and it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Some of you probably already know what I'm getting at, and some of you won't even know what I mean when the video is over. But I'm going to try to articulate this as best I can. I think a large issue that has sort of hampered my enjoyment of fighting games in the modern era is that it really doesn't feel like a lot of them want me to play them. For example, Guilty Gear Strive. This is objectively one of the tightest, prettiest and freshest fighting games that has probably ever been released, and my honeymoon phase of the game was absolutely fantastic, and I had almost nothing bad to say about the game beyond I'm dog shit at it. Almost. If you are a launch Strive player, you probably know that the word almost is doing a lot of fucking legwork right now. Guilty Gear Strive was, for a few months, plagued by one of the worst initial loading times ever because it liked to sit on its ass communicating with a server because always online is how video games be nowadays. This one was a long wait, to the point where it was one of the major criticisms towards an otherwise extremely solid game. My other Guilty Gear gripe with Guilty Gear Strive is that these fucking lobbies exist. I know, you've heard it all before. These stupid Habbo Hotel ass lobbies are basically the bane of trying to play anywhere but locally. I get it, but that doesn't mean I can't talk my own shit about them. The bare minimum the online betas had to do leading up to the game's release was make sure these things worked, and they really didn't. The fact that they were a necessary component to playing online in any form, even if you were using the methods that had you interact with them as little as possible, only serves to make them feel worse. Honestly, between this and the stupid loading times, it was like Guilty Gear Strive was trying to make the strongest effort it possibly could have mustered to make sure that you weren't playing it. And it worked, because I ended up tapping out of Strive a few months in. And it's a damn shame because after getting back into it recently, I've been absolutely loving it. Besides the wall break. Fuck wall break. Fuck stupid mechanics. I should take a moment to clarify just in case, because people love to assume that people just don't like things that they criticize. I don't dislike Guilty Gear Strive at all. But the launch of that game was rough. Very rough. And it showed some holes in modern fighting game design that I hadn't really seen or even considered in the past. Plus, I love critical analysis and being a hater. I'm kidding, that's a joke. It's fine, it's a good game. Lots of people believe lack of accessibility chases away new players from fighting games, and while I don't necessarily disagree at a surface level, I believe that clunky non-ergonomic bullshit like these menus doesn't help, and Strive is not even the worst offender of this lobby stuff. Have you seen BB Tag and Dragon Ball Fighters? Have you seen the fucking BB Tag lobby MPEG Toru Adachi roleplays? Those things fuck you up, man. They scar you for life. I can't believe that's a sentence I just said with my mouth. As much as I love Arxis, their UI design is kind of astonishingly bad. I would go as far as to say it's dog shit. It's like the most blatant example of flare over function that you could ever think to find. But this discussion has been done to death and everybody knows I would get way too carried away talking about UI design, so I'm going to move on to my next point. Cinematic stories are not a bad thing to have. However, when fighting games include these big cinematic stories, they usually make a huge deal out of them being there. This wouldn't be a bad thing if, cinematic stories in fighting games were well written, but they don't have a good track record now, do they? Of all of the fighting games I've played with cinematic stories that I've watched, I mean, obviously, first of all, it's a far cry from the old days of a single-player arcade mode per character with their own little narratives. And while these things, in small doses, were good, an overpowering majority of the full cinematic stories have been bad, or at least just not received well, and I believe that's not a symptom of fighting games as a whole. Fighting game stories can be good, and many fighting game stories are usually just deliberately cheesy, but things like Street Fighter V's A Shadow Falls take themselves way too seriously, and as a result, are flat out not really great at best and absolutely torturous to sit through at worst. What did they do to Zangief? Why? These stories came about because of the popularity of Mortal Kombat stories, which knowingly did the same fucking thing. Wait a second, that's not my sensor sound. It does sound familiar though. Fuck. What?
Hi, Kay. Who keeps using my sensor beeps?
Oh, it's just SonicHaXD. Wait, oh my gamut, it's Mortal Kombat funny man SonicHaXD.
That's me.
Honestly, it's really convenient that you would show up while I'm on a tangent about cinematic stories. It's almost like we plan this in advance because you're known for critically analysing these kinds of stories and I'm not. So with that in mind, I was wondering if you would like to handle this segment now that you're here, now that your assets are on my channel. You may as well use them a little bit,
Sure thing. So while I may be known to love criticizing fighting game story modes, I can't deny a strong point about these, and it's the fact that they are quite successful. Some fighting games can just rely on really good gameplay and flashy imagery to garner success, such as Dragon Ball FighterZ, but other fighting games do need to rely more on other factors too. Maybe some awesome music, or maybe some awesome character designs. But let's take my favorite company I love to simp for, rag on, NetherRealm Studios. If you told me to think of some simple words to describe this gaming company, I would say realistic art styles, fatalities, and cinematics. Of course, some people pick up the latest installment because Noob Saibot got announced, while others just are curious to see the conclusion of the Cage's family divorce drama. And interestingly enough, I would say I'm actually in the latter part of this example, especially when I was younger. Back when I was in high school, I didn't really have any time to play video games, nor did I really own any of the PlayStations or Xbox. However, I knew all the NetherRealm Studio story modes because I looked them up and watched them. So while I never owned any of these games, I knew all about them when I was younger. And I believe a lot of other people are like me too. Did not pick up the game, but still watched some walkthroughs. Heck, if you go on YouTube and search for some Sonya footage, you'll probably find some decent gameplay footage. However, her cinematic appearances get way more views. Just look at this. Sonya punches Johnny Cage. It has 1 million views for some reason. Now that we've gone through the fact that cinematic stories are successful, why are they so successful if they're so shit? And I think the answer to this question is actually similar to why video game movies are so successful, even though the majority of them are also shit. It's because people aren't going into these expecting an amazing plot. They aren't expecting to watch like an actual good movie. People are going to watch these because of the video game characters. I can guarantee that nobody is excited to see the Super Mario movie because of Illumination Studios. No, they're going there because it's freaking Mario, the most beloved, most popular video game franchise character. And I think this goes back to my point, especially for fighting games. We love these characters. They are so cool. They have super flashy moves. However, in terms of personalities, they ain't got much. So the only ways we can get more personalities out of these characters are, you guessed it, cinematics. This is why NetherRealm Studios' intro dialogue videos get so many views on YouTube, because people want to see these characters interact. They want to know more about these characters and their personalities. It's almost to a point where these characters are basically celebrities in some people's eyes. Now, I'm sure there are many other reasons as to why cinematic and fighting games exist, but I believe that this is one of the biggest reasons. So, in the end, the next time you see a horrible fighting game cinematic story mode, just remember, it's all our faults for simping too much for these characters. Why do I simp for Reptile that much?
See, this is what I mean. Everyone articulates their opinions way better than I do. Thank you for being on the channel, by the way. That was an unexpected and definitely not planned in advance collaborative effort to make this segment pop more.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Case.
Now plug your stuff, plug your channel.
You can find me on YouTube by typing SonicHaXD. I make funny Mortal Kombat content. Recently, I just went through MK vs DC. It's a very bad story mode, but oh, was it entertaining. Thanks again for having me, Kay.
Bye bye. Like Sonic says, in a vacuum, these aren't bad, conceptually speaking. They make money as well, which is really the reason they exist. But I just never really vibe with them. I used to really like fighting games where the story would unravel itself as you played through the arcade mode, even if that method made overall stories feel significantly less meaty than a game like Mortal Kombat 11, which occasionally threatened to be a passable piece of cinema. I really enjoyed the personalised feeling of picking my favourite character and seeing their own take on the story through their own eyes, which is something that I've missed so much from the genre. Street Fighter V and Guilty Gear Xrd do have kind of personalised arcade-like modes for their cast, but they just don't itch that spot for me. The awesome thing about King of Fighters 15 is that even if it didn't do it intentionally, it feels like the game addressed my gripes with modern fighting games, and it just feels so shockingly personalised to my own personal taste in fighting games that it's a little bit crazy. That's cringe. I'm keeping it in the video though. While there might be some really weird issues with the online play, like it saying it can't find an opponent when you've been matched up with an opponent, Strive kinda helped me to accept that this is just part of the teething process of a new fighting game. The menus in general are really clean, often being straight to the point with what goes where. An extremely basic function of UI design that's somehow refreshing to see after a decade of the worst fucking fighting game menu design that this world has ever seen and may ever see. The King of Fighters has historically always had an overarching story that all of the characters become involved in if you pick them, and King of Fighters 15 continues the tradition of making the story feel like an episode of an ongoing scenario, rather than an entire self-contained story. While people largely found this iteration of KOF's story disappointing, mostly because it leaned into cheesy anime tropes and hip zoomer lingo, it's worth noting that KOF has kind of always been cheesy. Like, sure, Kukuri calls Antonov a boomer, but Ryo Sakazaki's KOF 98 win quote has him call the opponent a dweepenheimer. Do you know what a dweepenheimer is? Well, regardless, it's a natural progression of KOF's inherently goofy nature from the arcade days, and even if the story's nothing grand, the fact that it stays true to what KOF is at its core is what I really like about it. Playing KOF 15 has made me realise that one of the things I value most from a fighting game is the arcade feel of it. And to that extent, it's kind of easy to see why games that lean into the luxuries of home console gaming don't really strike the same chord with me. Fighting games have come a really long way, and while it's genuinely impressive and fascinating, it's honestly really comfy to see a fighting game that embraces its past rather than looking to the future. The King of Fighters still continues to celebrate the old days of fighting games, and by and large, it really brings the arcade feel home in a way that I haven't experienced in a long time. In a way that actually ended up completely revitalizing my love for the genre and learning to appreciate it all over again. It's kind of like a huge love letter to the original arcade fighting genre, and the fact that it's so unapologetic about being this is really one of the coolest things about experiencing King of Fighters 15 as an adult when I grew up with arcade fighting games as a child. I don't really know how to describe what arcade feel is in only a few words, by the way, so maybe I'll do another video on that someday. After all of these years of fighting games not quite feeling the same way to me anymore, King of Fighters 15 has more or less amalgamated all of the good stuff and turned it into a love letter for the past, which has reeled me back in, and even led me to valuing the good parts of the aforementioned games I didn't necessarily love. Looking back at the past has made me appreciate the future of the genre a lot more. In conclusion, the King of Fighters 15 is a fighting game. And that's pretty damn awesome.
Once the hour is too late, pride it never gets about